Hello, fellow chess players. And as a coach, I sometimes get messages. I'm a positional player. I play d4, and I like all of the openings. I have some positional, slow, steady type of play I like. But there is this one, the East Indian or the King's Indian defense. And those nasty opponents go into tactical and dynamic battle, where they always threaten this nasty attack with the pawn on f5. And it's actually quite tricky to deal with. And if you're like that, this series of videos is for you. It's the first of the series of four where I'll show four different ways of dealing with this f5 push and how to choose a mono. So, if you're interested, leave a like, subscribe down below, and here we go. And the first video is going to be about the Botwinnik's first method. Why it's first? Because there are two, as you might have seen on the video thumbnail. And it's called the Botwinnik method because it's actually him who played a wonderful strategic game against Ishak Boleslavsky in 1940 at the US Championship, just before the Second World War. So what is his method? Maybe you have already seen it. It's to take on f4, and thus, if the opponent takes here, we are happy because his original threat would be f4, and if he takes with the pawn, Botwinnik's idea is to play this nasty move f4, which forces an opponent to take a decision. And actually, all of the decisions might be as well good as bad. It depends really on the circumstances. So the first one is just take the pawn here. Seems okay, but this is just a dreaded pawn to have. An isolated pawn like that is going to fall very easily. So we might play e4, the other option, the other obvious option. But it doesn't work that well either. Because of this knight f2, of course we're not going to take here, and maybe g4 one day. And before it was black who was attacking on the king side, and now white has some practical chances too. So that's why Botwinnik's opponent, Ishak Boleslavsky, chose taking. He actually should have played e4. It would have been a little bit better, I guess. But okay, he was scared. He should have been scared. But being scared is just what humans do sometimes. So he took, and here this position was widely described in the press at that time, in the Soviet press by other grandmasters. They thought that Botwinnik was just dumb. Why the hell would you take a position like that? Like there is this passed pawn that is protected by the other pawn, which might be dangerous. The bishop is now open. We won't do that. And the pawn g3 is attacked, might be attacked actually one day, and it's weak, but not at all actually, because this position of white is quite good. He stopped f4, as we have already said. He controls some key cases, some key squares, and now he can just move the king here and protect everything. And we'll see that effectively white is just a little bit better according to the engine. Nothing spectacular, but it's very tricky, very tricky to play with black actually. Because white just arranges his pieces like he wants. He doesn't have to worry to defend very quickly because opponent just doesn't have any resources to attack quickly. And then here black just doesn't have any plans. He attacked, but he doesn't have any additional ways to attack. One of the ways black could have attacked is a plan like that to double the rooks here against the g3 pawn, but it doesn't work because of a very fancy move g4. So that if black takes two times, actually there is a problem. You are just getting mated, bozo. So yeah, white is winning here. So black just doesn't know what to do. And black has to play, like, he probably doesn't have to play it, but he chose bishop g7. Okay, this is a normal move. Probably he'll put the bishop somewhere here, or just a normal regrouping. But when white plays a3, Botwinnik really highlights the whole idea of playing that, of playing f4. Because in this position here, black can't really attack white's king side, and white is just going to attack the queen side. So Boleslavsky panics, and it's now Botwinnik who attacks on the king side because of this f4 pawn, because of this d4 bishop. Now actually Botwinnik has more active pieces on the king side, and Boleslavsky is so pressured that he loses a pawn. So a very beautiful proof of concept by Botwinnik, who showed that it was actually possible to defend like that. So instead of um, playing e4 in this position, when Florin Georgiou with white did the same thing, Botwinnik's first method, as usual, Ray Hans, the player from the Netherlands with black, tried another thing. He thought that maybe if he played e4, he's going to be smashed the same way that Botwinnik smashed Boleslavsky. So he took on f4, a logical idea. However, it creates this nasty isolated pawn that limits the bishop, that is going to be attacked afterwards, and it might work actually for black. There is a world where it works. The position is not that bad for black even here, because there are all of those squares e4, e5 that are protected, that are grabbed by this pawn. He might even play a4 because now the bishop is opened, as the pawn on e4, e5 isn't there anymore. But he plays too passively and thus gets punished. Here, just very, very beautiful idea by Georgiou. He applies all of those principles you might have seen in my video on the isolated pawn and just brings them to the absolute. He exchanges everything, and like that, Ray has absolutely no counterplay, and Botwinnik is just crushing. Georgiou is just crushing, absolutely destroying the opponent, getting every piece better and better, and eventually blocks the pawn with a knight, as Karpov would do. And then he just chains the opponent's pieces to the f5 pawn. They have to protect the pawn at all costs, otherwise he's just a pawn down. And using that, he's able to play on the whole board with some space grabs on the queen side. And then he'll just go here, rook a7, and here Ray had to give up because he knew that he's going to lose a pawn one way or another. But everything is not that easy, actually. Otherwise, everyone would just play that. And black has multiple ways to actually counter this Botwinnik's first method. And white has to take all of them into account while choosing to employ this method. Like, for example, here, it's kind of the same position we have seen before, and black is going to push f5 eventually. But here, black actually managed to put his knights in a very, very nice position whenever the pawn e5 disappears. So, in this position, black is happy to grab an isolated pawn because he feels that he is going to have a lot of activity. And as such, he puts the knight on e5 very, very fast. Then he brings the queen into attack. And it starts becoming a little bit dangerous for white, actually, because the rook might come here, and the pawn c4 might be weak one day, and white won't really be able to block this pawn. So white got threatened and took on e5, and it's not the same thing at all. Because now it's not one weak pawn, it's two strong pawns that are going to match together. First, black will protect everything. Here, you have to find a very, very important move. Once again, you can pause the video if you want to, but it's a4 to stop this dreadful b4 idea. It's basically the only idea that white has in this position. And then there's f4, e4, pawns marching forward together. He might have tried to take on c5, but it wouldn't help because rooks are just gorgeous and bishops too, and black is going to regain the pawn afterwards. But here, Teplitsky plays bishop h5, and after e3, the position is completely winning. Unfortunately, not the whole text of the game was preserved. Maybe Sutovsky needed a draw because it was a Grandmaster non-tournament, so you might want to play strategic here. But all of the pieces of white are just awful, because in this game, black was able to use that f5 isolated pawn as an advantage, and then joined by its friend from d6, it completely wrecked the white's position apart. But even if black's pieces are not sufficiently active in order to play this position with the isolated pawn, there is another idea, which is quite interesting. Here, for example, Artashes Minasyan playing with black, an Armenian player, against another fellow grandmaster, Sergei Volkov. He does this little inclusion of c5, and this inclusion makes it easier for him to counter the first method of Botwinnik, as now he can push f4, f5, so he threatens f4 already, so the opponent has to respond, and now he can play e4. And if you remember well, actually one of the main reasons white does f4 is to have the d4 square, and he doesn't have it anymore, and it can be quite difficult for black to answer all of those challenges. Moreover, or even worse for white, that black now has all of the b5 ideas, and black might actually be better. It's not that clear. Maybe white with a well-timed g4 will be able to swing the tide, but black has a quite comfortable play. So with white, we have to be one step further, and we have actually to anticipate all of that. And when black actually plays in this position, when black plays c5, we should be able, in order to have a good position, we should be able to take on c4, on c6. Because if we don't, we just retranspose in the other position, where we let the black play e4 and c5, and black is going to attack white, and white won't like it at all. With all of those squares available for black pieces, poor white. He's going to be tied left, right, and center. All of those pieces are tight. White can't move, and black is borderline winning. That's why David Alberto playing with white has to find this move, which is quite easy to find if you know where to look, is en passant. It's not forced, but it's quite nice anyway. And then he just upgrades his pieces, and the position is more or less equal, I'd say. You have to pay some attention when black wants to play d5, but the position is quite equal. Like knight b5, d5, queen a5, with maybe not equal position because it's so difficult to evaluate. You can't really say it's equal, but I'd say that it's unbalanced yet with equal chances. I won't show the remainder of the game because it was not that well played. That's why sometimes, in order to overcome the existing circumstances, like here, when black has already played c5, white has to be quite clever in order to do the same maneuver, but in a different way, in order to have a better position. Like, for example, here, black played, once again, Dutch player. He played knight h5, and here, if white played f4, black would have actually taken here. e4 is here isn't possible because it's too passive. You can't play this position without a black squared bishop. White with this brilliant move g4 is just going to be a lot more active. So black would just take here, and the position would be quite equal because usually when the opponent takes on f4, we want to take with the rook another piece. However, here it's impossible. We are just going to lose an exchange. So we'll have to take with a pawn, and the position will be quite equal. We didn't get basically anything from it. So white, before playing f4, has to make a clever maneuver. And can you guess it? 3, 2, 1. It's bishop to f3. The idea being that if black goes away, you just take the pawn. And when black played the logical move in the position, now we can play f4, and then if the opponent takes, now we can take and take with a piece. As such, this pawn will be very, very weak. And e4, which might be mortal otherwise, isn't possible at all, because white can just win a piece fair and square. So here, Langeweg tried playing b4, which is possible, but it fails to the attack, to the onslaught of white pieces on the black squares. Why? Because white has 3 pieces, 4 pieces ready to go against those 2 pawns on the all on the black squares, and black has only 1 piece, maybe 2, that is ready to protect the black squares. So when white attacks, they have to move. If e4, we just take here, we just do that, and white is raining all of the black squares, and white is winning. So Langeweg tried playing something like that, but it didn't work, just because this pawn is going to be weak, and we are going to take it afterwards. Just like that. Queens exchanged in order to reduce every counterplay, and Langeweg gave up without even waiting for the opponent's move, because he just realized that the pawn is going to be lost, and white is going to be winning. So, to sum up, while f5 may be a very, very tricky pawn push to punish, and sometimes it's not punishable at all, Botwinnik's first method is a very sharp way in order to actually get out of it and not to let the opponent play f4 himself. However, there are a lot of nuances to look for, and not only those I have just shown you. Not only you have to look for e4 and c5, and afterwards you have to look if this is a good endgame, middle game with the isolated pawn. Here it is, because black would be just too slow to play it. But also you have to calculate everything thoroughly in order to make sure it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, maybe it's not just a good method altogether in this position, and that's why I highly suggest that you follow my channel in order to see other videos. There are 3 more methods of defending the f5 push to come.